Morning and a very warm welcome to today's seminar titled Decoding India's Quality Control Orders. We will begin with a presentation by Dr. Prabhakar. She's a fellow at Center for Social Economic Progress. Her research focus on international trade, industries policies, and competitiveness. She has worked for more than a decade at various think tanks, NCAER, CEW, IAFT, would be to name a few among many others. The presentation will be followed by a special remarks from Mr. Sanjeet Singh, Senior Advisor at NITI Aayog and an Indian Revenue Service Officer of the 1991 batch. He oversees key policy areas related to trade and commerce, tax reform, and disinvestment of central public sector enterprises. Thank you so much for coming, sir. We will then move to a panel discussion featuring Mr. Shaunak. He's a young entrepreneur and a policy advocate actively engaging with MSME. Mr. Anil Bhardwaj, Secretary General of FISME, and Mr. Arun Goyal, Director of Academy of Business Studies. After the panel discussion, we will open the floor for Q&A with the audience. The session will be chaired and moderated by Dr. Laveesh Bhandari, President and Senior Fellow at CSEP. With that, I now invite Mr. Laveesh to deliver the opening remarks. I humbly request you to please keep your phone on silent. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just speak from here. So one of the biggest issues that I see in this whole space is that there is really a very limited understanding of the framework of why do we really need QCOs. At its very core, essentially a QCO is the government meddling in to identify the kind of quality which it feels is required in any in a country. Now, why should the government be a part of this? Why can't the buyer and the seller themselves decide what is the specific quality that can be transacted? And so therefore, if quality could be perfectly seen, or then there is no need for a QCO, because the buyer can for themselves decide, unless the government wants a specific baseline of some sort of a quality for each product, and there's really very limited need for that. There may be some certain cases where there are environmental issues or health issues where there might be, but otherwise for a whole range of products, you really don't need the government meddling in. Now, that's the theoretical part of it, right? But there's another aspect to it, which is sometimes not really understood as well, especially by researchers as ourselves, is the whole process of identifying what is the good quality. And there is obviously a mechanism for doing that. There is the BIS. They have a certain mandate. They evaluate the qualities as assessed, as they need to assess, given the parameters, sometimes by the department, sometimes by industry, and sometimes they need to figure themselves out. So there's that process. So in India, what we are seeing is that on one hand, there seems to be a rather liberal approach towards the government trying to identify the range of studies, or sorry, the range of products where it needs to specify this. And of course, there is a whole surfeit of issues related to the way quality control orders are actually implemented, the issues related to the specifics of the QCOs, whether they are aligned with global parameters, the issues related to our own facilities, there are issues related to the speed of doing it, and so on. So between these two, there's a whole debate that has been going on for some time. And I'm very glad to see that that debate has actually gotten a lot of public attraction. That's right, in recent weeks. And I'm again, sometimes we do studies which just come out at the right point in time, and work on QCOs seems is just being released at when the iron is hot, and perhaps we will be able to bring in some sort of coherence into these spaces. So with that, I would welcome you all. It's indeed great to have you, and hand it over to you, sir, for you first for your presentation.
Thanks, Laveesh, for setting the context of the subject. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. Before I start, I would like to thank Nancy Gupta for the extensive research support that has gone in this work. And this is a brief presentation on the paper that's kept outside the auditorium. You can have a look and you can go to the website and download the paper. I'll start with the global trends on tariffs and non-tariff measures. Then I'll go to India's quality control orders, which is a topic for today's presentation. This will be followed by sector-specific trends. I'll be able to talk about only a few sectors, but then the report and the paper talks about a lot of and all the sectors that have been considered. This will be followed by the findings from the regression analysis that we conducted on the database that we created, some discussion on the industry meetings that we did, and what are the policy recommendations that emerged from the work. So at the global level, just two key observations here. While the tariffs over years across the globe have fallen, what we see is that the issuance of non-tariff measures has increased. So what are non-tariff measures? There are two most prevalent forms. One is the technical barriers to trade, and other is the sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So technical barriers to trade, like energy saving standards, emission standards, so that would come under TBTs. Something like permissible levels of insecticides or pesticides that are used in agricultural products like wheat or rice would be categorized as SPS measures. So this is a global trend. Now, what are India's quality control orders? As per government notifications, the quality control orders are issued to ensure robust manufacturing ecosystem in the country, and they are equally implemented to the products that are manufactured in the country and to the products that are coming to India through imports. And one of the objectives is also to ensure export competitiveness of the products that are being manufactured in the country. One of the problems with the quality control orders is that while these are conceptualized by the line ministries, maybe the textile ministry, the chemicals ministry, these are enforced by the Bureau of Indian Standards. So there are two different players that are acting along the way. And when we started working on quality control orders, the first challenge was the identification of the exact products that are being impacted because of these quality control orders. So what the government gives is, it's a huge list, long list, government-wise, ministry-wise, of the quality control orders that are imposed. And it would identify the broad sector that is being impacted, but not the exact product, which we call the harmonized system code that is being impacted, which creates a challenge for researchers like us. And also, I would assume it's a challenge for the firm that wants to comply with these orders when the exact product is not being identified by the orders. Now, when these quality control orders are imposed, it creates kind of a supply chain disruption because you need to comply whether you are a domestic producer or an importer that is supplying to the Indian economy, the Indian market. You have to comply with a lot of processes, the testing procedures, and then you obtain a certificate, which is a cost-intensive process. And in this process, there's a huge disruption of the supply chain that happens. So the intended aim of this regulation to achieve export competitiveness or more exports, it is to be seen whether it is achieved or not. And that is the backdrop for this study. So why did we undertake this study? That was the first thing was to address the challenge that I just explained on the data, and that there's no mapping of these quality control orders to the exact harmonized system codes that are being impacted by these orders. So we created this database to fill this data gap. And second, to understand what is the impact of these quality control orders on the trade flows of India, its imports as well as exports. So to address the data challenge, how did we do that? We used a publication by the Academy of Business Studies, which is a publication by Mr. Arun Goel, who is one of the panelists for today's discussion, and he's a little delayed. So on the right-hand side, you see a snapshot of so they just list all the regulations that the ministries impose. So it's just a listing. they don't go a step forward to map these regulations with the harmonized system codes. So this is how their publication gives the details. So we took these exhaustive list of quality control orders. We identified the exact HS code that are being impacted because of each of these regulations. And yeah, it so happened that many of the regulations are impacting the same HS codes. So we actually identified the unique HS codes that the existing QCOs are impacting. And then we went a step further to categorize these unique HS codes as intermediate goods, consumer goods, or capital goods to understand where are these placed across the supply chain, to understand the supply chain implications of QCOs. And lastly, we also identified the first year of the notification of the QCOs that are in existence. And this database that we created ends at 2024, December 2024. So this was the database. Based on this database, we have done some data analysis. The first one is just an overall trend of QCOs. We see that QCOs surged from just 88 in 2019 to 765 in 2024. So you can see the rate at which the issuance of QCOs has increased over years. This one, which is very important for our supply chain narrative. So on the left-hand side, you see what is the composition of these QCOs across the different stages of production: intermediate goods, capital goods, and consumer goods. And we see the most important takeaway is that most of the goods that are being impacted by QCOs are of intermediate in nature, which is the most critical item for your production process. And on the right-hand side, you see what is the sectoral composition of the QCOs. And the most impacted sectors are metals, textiles, chemicals, machinery and electronics, plastic and rubber. And again, you see that many of these sectors are the sectors that provide key upstream items for the production process. So again, a huge risk for the supply chains in the domestic market. So if we see the trends over years for different sectors, it very much aligns with the overall story that till 2018-19, most of the sectors either had very few QCOs or no QCOs. And suddenly it just surged. For example, if I take an example of textiles, from 0 in 2019 to 65 in 2024. So yeah, whatever has happened in the last 5-6 years. And these were the years when our tariff policies became more protectionist, and there were other investment restrictions that were also implemented. Also, one of the observations from the data is that many of the high QCO sectors are also the sectors where you see large firm concentration. That is something we don't test in the paper, but then this is an observation that we make in the paper. Lastly, on there's a first set of analysis is that when we see where are these sectors importing its goods from, which country are these sectors importing its goods from, one country tops the list, which is China. For most of the sectors, it's the largest importer. So again, it raises a question, why? This is a common trend across all the sectors that have QCOs, maximum QCOs on them. Now, this was an overall story. Now we'll go to the sector-specific trends. I've picked a few sectors for today's discussion, but for most sectors, you can read the report. Well, I'll start with chemicals. So the next few charts will tell you what has been the parallel story for tariffs, QCOs, exports, and imports. So the dark blue line is the quality control orders, and you see that for chemicals, it picked up from 2018. And the tariff story for most of the sectors, I'll just say at the very start that for tariffs, we see that either the tariffs are increasing along with QCOs or tariffs have stabilized. There are a few exceptions where QCOs and tariffs are so tariffs are falling and QCOs are increasing. There are only a few sectors, but mostly for other sectors, tariffs and QCOs go parallelly, or tariffs have become stable. So in the case of chemicals, you can see that QCOs are increasing, tariffs have stabilized. You see a drop in the few years later after the QCOs were implemented. You see a drop in imports as well as exports. Similarly, for textiles, QCOs have increased. In this case, we see that tariffs did fall, but then imports and exports also show a fall. Footwear, similar story, QCOs and tariffs increased parallelly. Imports fell and also the exports fell. This is one exception, machinery and electronics, where QCOs increased and tariffs were kind of stable, but imports and exports they maintained a high growth rate. And I would assume this is because of one segment, which is the smartphone segment. Toys, which is the supposed success story of the quality control orders. So quality control orders increase, which is the dark blue line. And you see tariffs are also parallelly increasing. So imports initially fell after the introduction of QCOs, but then we see they picked up again recently. And exports, which is the eventual goal of the QCOs, that exports should pick up, they haven't picked up as expected. So this was the QCO impacted products aggregated. Now, if we try to see at disaggregated level, this is a small exercise that we did, and I'll just spend a minute or two on this. So across the top impacted sectors, we we categorize the 6-digit product lines under these sectors in 2 categories. Yes. The product lines that show a fall after the QCO, the percentage of product lines that show a fall compared to the percentage of product lines in these sectors that show an increase. And this increase and fall is observed for the year in which the QCO is implemented and the 3 years following that particular year. And along with that, we also see the average tariff growth for those sectors in the last 5 years, and that is when most of the QCOs were implemented. And we see that for most of the sectors, the percentage or the proportion of HS 6-digit codes that show a fall after QCOs is more than the proportion of HS codes that show an increase after QCOs for both exports and imports. And one more observation from this, that as the QCOs were increasing, so in those years when there was a surge in QCOs, the tariffs also increased, by XYZ percentage, barring a few sectors. So the ones in orange are the sectors where tariffs also parallelly increased along with the QCOs. So this is the data analysis that we did on the database that we created. Now, there can be questions that, this export and import fall that we observe in the preliminary data analysis can be because of external factors or something else that was happening around those years, like COVID or any external event. So to control for that, we did a very simple regression analysis using the HS 6-digit codes, which are impacted by QCOs as the cross-section. So these were around 353 6-digit HS codes for the period 2000 to 2023. So it makes a total of 8,473 panel data points that we did our regression on. And we estimated 2 regressions, one for import, the other one for export, that you see on the right-hand side. We controlled for QCOs through a dummy, that if a QCO was imposed, for the year after the QCO was imposed, the dummy takes the value 1 and 0 otherwise for all the years prior to QCOs. Then tariff was controlled for, and we also controlled for the year dummies and also the sector dummies to account for any other developments that must have happened in those years or for those sectors. So we estimated 2 models. One was for overall exports and imports QCOs, and the second model for the QCO being divided across stages: QCOs on intermediate, QCOs on capital, and QCOs on consumer goods. I'll explain the results. We will just focus on the highlighted portions. So the first table, which is the table on model B for overall exports and imports, it tells us that when a QCO is imposed, it leads to a fall in imports, not in the year of the QCO, but after a year by around 12.9 or 13%, let's say. But on exports, 1 year after the QCO, we still see the exports rising, But then the exports fall in the second year after QCOs, which by around 12.8%, again, the same magnitude. And if we see the long-term effect, which is the cumulative of the present as well as the 3 lags, we see that the imports fall by around 24.3% because of the QCOs, and exports don't see any significant change. So neither a decline nor an increase that is envisioned by the QCOs. Now, when we break these QCOs on the right-hand side into intermediate, capital, and consumer, we see the story is interesting on the intermediate side that for the year in which QCO is implemented, the imports fall by 16%. In the next year, it falls by 17%. And in the long term, for the intermediate goods category, because of QCOs, the imports fall by around 30%. And parallelly on exports end, there's no long-term impact, as we saw on the table on left-hand side. For consumer goods, surprisingly, irrespective of the QCOs, imports kept coming in, and significant increase even after QCOs for imports, but no impact on exports. So the key takeaway from the preliminary data analysis and the regression analysis was that while QCOs disrupted the imports, which probably it aimed to that we should be self-sufficient, especially for the intermediate goods, which is very critical for the supply chain. It didn't lead to any gains in exports, which again is a goal of, it's a laid out goal of the quality control orders. So possibly there needs to be an assessment of the ways in which these quality control orders are designed and implemented. To support the data analysis, we held a stakeholder discussion in collaboration with FISME and one of our panelists, Shaunak, Rungta. He was also there in this panel discussion. I'll just very briefly tell you what were the key takeaways. Supply chain disruptions, which we found through the impact on intermediate goods. Examples were given of the CRGO steel that had QCOs on it, and it led to a lot of supply chain disruption in the economy. Then high compliance costs, especially for it's a big cost for the MSME players specifically. Administrative delays, especially for the consignments that are coming from the other countries, because it takes up to 6 months for a consignment to clear the testing and to get the certificate and to enter India. And also uneven impact on the firms with respect to their sizes. It is seen that the larger firms are able to reach out to the government and they are able to comply better with the quality control orders. So that again becomes a problem. So this ended the work that we did, and what emerged from the work in terms of the policy suggestions. First one upfront is there needs to be a clear listing of the quality control orders with the products that are being impacted. And as we continue our work on the quality control orders, it is again becoming a challenge because we did our exercise till December 2024. And this mapped database is something that a relevant agency should be maintaining for researchers, but most importantly for the firms that have to comply with these QCOs. Second, the criteria for QCO implementation. According to BIS, QCOs are implemented for environmental safety, plant, human, or animal safety, and also to address unfair trade practices and national security. But we say that if there are already trade remedy measures like anti-dumping duties, then why do we need QCOs to address unfair trade practices? That is one. And also for the goods that are not being sufficiently produced in the country, like the case of CRGO steel, why do we need a QCO? So there needs to be a reassessment of what goods come under the ambit of QCOs. That's the second policy suggestion. And third, very important for the MSME segment, to streamline the compliance. Probably support tasks for the MSMEs should be set up, digital verification, but these are like long-term goals. But yeah, to very much to streamline the compliance. And fourth, to address the problem of market concentration. As I mentioned in my presentation, that many of the sectors that see most of the QCOs are highly concentrated sectors. And because of the QCOs, the concentration possibility increases, which gives pricing power in the hands of these few firms. So there should be adequate steps to address this concentration problem by the relevant agencies to check the anti-competitiveness behavior anyway across the domestic market. So yeah, with that, we conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Prerna. Now may I request Singh to give his remarks.
So good morning, Mr. Bhandari, Prerna, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to interact on such an interesting and a very important critical area. Many of you are already aware that the government is extremely seized of this fact that there has to be deregulation. And reform is one area which has been mandated across all ministries. So we at NITI Aayog are, of course, leading from the front. And I'm happy to share, of course, that Laveesh and his team are an integral part of that process. So in fact, I was just asking him, is this already being done? And he said, yes. So good, we'll take it to the conclusion. So first, let me congratulate Prerna and her team for this excellent report, which is, like you mentioned, very timely, because this is one area which very inadvertently has, in fact, began to impact our trade, and which is a very consequence which we can ill afford at this time. So it's a very opportune report. It is data-driven, well-researched, and its recommendations are really spot on. So many congratulations to CSEP, Prerna, Laveesh, and all those involved. But kindly allow me to take my bit of airtime to be able to place it in context. I mean, before we really demonize all the QCOs. So take the context of our ambition. Our ambition, national ambition, is very clear: to accelerate economic growth and to ensure that manufacturing sector contribution to the GDP sharply increases. From about 16-17%, we were looking at something like close to a quarter, 25%. And the strategic goal rests on a very important pillar: quality. And that is the intent and scale. And in this context, let me talk about the quality control orders, why they were introduced in the first place. And dare I say, I mean, you have correctly pointed out that there has been a surge. So one can look at it that suddenly India has woken up and we suddenly have chosen this weapon of choice and we are going after QCOs. Not true. I've worked in the Commerce Ministry for a pretty long time. Our capacities are being enhanced. And dare I say, this is an area where we have really picked up our understanding, and we find it pretty convenient to use. And yes, so that's why probably you see the surge. The need was always there. We were always facing a challenge. Anti-dumping, there is still a challenge, how to implement it. So that's a separate debate, but I'm sure CSEP would like to go into that area, why this particular QCO has become a weapon of choice rather than others. What are the pros and cons? It should not be very difficult to see. But having said that, see, the time has come that the government has aggressively deployed the QCOs and has used it as a core regulatory instrument to enforce mandatory quality floor for products across the economy. And as Prerna very correctly pointed out, not only for imported products, for our domestic products also. The intent behind QCOs is non-negotiable and fundamentally sound in many ways. It is rooted in the philosophy which our Prime Minister has raised about zero defect and zero effect. So if we have to deliver products that meet the highest global standards and ensure zero adverse environmental impact, then we have to take drastic measures and take them now. So you mentioned about the framework being compliant with the international best practices. Yes, it is. You know it very well. So it aligns with the WTO's technical barriers to trade agreement, and this ensures that our quality mandates, of course, protect human life, health, and the environment, and are not really arbitrary in that sense. You have also pointed out, I think in the earlier slides, that a number of nations, mostly developed nations, are increasingly using this for their own national goals. You're right that the scale of this regulatory commitment has been unprecedented. From just about 88 QCOs in 2019, and it has surged to about more than 765 in 2024 by the time your study ended. And I'm told that there are about 100 more in the pipeline, which will soon begin to take effect. But here, let me take a pause, and lest you find me running to the defense of QCOs at the cost of everything else. So this nuanced data-driven policy which you have really laid down with this report, actually does call for a recalibration, and we at NITI are working very closely and with erudite minds like Mr. Bhandari and his team to actually address this, because we clearly feel that a mature policy framework must be agile and must be responsive to empirical data whenever it is produced. So this recent analysis of QCO implementation has provided us with a crucial feedback. And of course, that demands a nuanced recalibration. We need to ensure that the QCOs function strictly as instruments of quality assurance and not inadvertently become a source of trade friction that undermines the very competitiveness of our domestic industry, which your report is pointing out, it is increasingly being seen as that. So from your data-driven insights from the report which I was going through, so the first thing you mentioned is about the import suppression and export paradox. This is my terminology, not entirely yours. So the econometric analysis indicates that QCOs in their current implementations are significantly suppressing trade flows. So overall imports are declining by about 24% as per your report. And crucially, import of essential intermediate goods, the inputs vital for domestic manufacturing, are suffering the steepest impact. And here I must mention that at NITI, and we ourselves are carrying out a number of studies. In fact, we did one on an MSME sector of hand tools and power tools. Now, they are ones who really came back and said, look, please remove the QCOs on various intermediate products because they are hurting us. Why? And that included by the steel, the cold rolled grain oriented steel, because they also use that in not large quantities, not large enough for domestic producers to be able to produce. So that brings the important point that if we are not producing a certain item domestically, then we have to really look at the justification of banning its import, especially when it's needed by domestic exporters. So your major, I'll not go through you have really brilliantly gone through the entire presentation yourself. So this, of course, suggests that we need to urgently address this challenge where QCOs are restricting vital inputs without yielding a corresponding sustained boost in the global export as we wanted it to do. The challenge is the fundamental principle of global value chains, that is, competitive imports are a prerequisite for competitive exports. So this recognition allow me to, in fact, put together what my take has been from your report and from our understanding so far. First, of course, has been what one can call the supply chain starvation. And the most vivid illustration, of course, comes from the supply chain bottleneck, which you have mentioned, the QCOs on intermediate products. Now, we risk input starvation wherever the domestic supply itself is low. And a classic case you mentioned is the cold rolled grain-oriented CRGO steel. In fact, yesterday we were at Meerut. We led a team there because we are doing a study on sports goods manufacturing, how we can really build it up. Again, their complaint was exactly about CRGO steel. He says, though it's not available in sufficient quantities, we don't have such a large demand. Our demand is probably 50 tons or something. And the domestic steel producers tell us that you want 500 tons and then come to us, otherwise don't waste our time. So in effect, they're saying that, look, we can manufacture it, but you don't have the demand so far to be able to justify a large amount of our normal production being diverted to you. So in a sense, something like a CRGO steel is unavailable to my MSMEs. On top of that, if we are to put a QCO and not allow its flow to come into our domestic producers, that exacerbates the problem. So the QCO which is imposed on this item intended to curb substandard imports and ensure parity with domestic producers. But this has led to a production delay and supply shortages because of foreign suppliers. They face complex certification hurdles. But at the same time, the domestic suppliers, because of their own economics, are unable to supply. So that leaves most of our MSMEs in a fix. And this leads me to the second point, which is the MSME burden. So you have correctly pointed out that there's a disproportionate burden being cast on the smaller firms, namely MSMEs, which we are targeting that they form 30% of our, they'll be contributing 30% to our GDP. So the QCO compliances are imposing a disproportionate burden on the MSMEs. and they struggle with certification cost and face lengthy administrative approvals. But interestingly, when we met the MSMEs in these sectors, they said, look, the larger of the MSMEs said, get us testing labs, etc. Right? The smaller one said, can you do away with the QCOs? We don't have to get into tests at all. So there were two kind of responses which were coming through. But both said, QCOs are really causing us a challenge, not because they don't want quality. They said, look, when we export, our importers in Europe and the US, they demand quality, and we are willing to do that. But the problem is, if you're going to stifle my supply of inputs, if you're going to put such a long delay on the testing and the certification, that's going to destroy me. So please allow me to work to produce a quality which I'll be able to export. Don't impose this additional burdens on me. This was the demand which is coming from the MSMEs. So let me quickly state that the evidence which you have raised, that basically will ask us to question that should our policy be focusing on three major pillars. Number one, strict adherence to rationale and scope. And you have correctly pointed out that the imposition of QCOs must be strictly and transparently limited to genuine quality considerations, namely those of safety, health, and environmental protection. They cannot be used as an indirect tool to address economic issues like dumping, for which we have a separate. And you have also mentioned something very interesting, which I like, a supply chain analysis, to be carried out. That is there sufficient supply? Should we be banning them? This can be done initially before we employ the QCOs, and even in the cases where the QCOs have been imposed, we should actually be carrying out. For example, in this particular case of CRGO, we'll be requesting the ministries to look at it again. Look, our domestic supplies are being stifled. You are not allowing the foreign suppliers to supply us. There's a problem we have. The second is enhancing transparency and compliance. And I'm delighted to see that you have actually worked on something very basic. So when I say that, look, you cannot import this product has been defined across the board through the HSN code. So we should need to say, look, the following HSN codes you can't import, or you will be able to import with so-and-so amount of restrictions. So I'm told that Mr. Goel and his team have done extremely good work on that, and I'm really congratulate you on that. And that's something which is really required, and that should become the norm, that whenever a QCO is notified, it must notify specific HSNs saying that, look, this is where we are what we are talking about, and not everything in general, and not left to interpretation of the person sitting at the border control. And third is to ensure competitive neutrality, which is to ensure that the compliance costs do not consolidate market power. Now, that is something which has been highlighted in this, and that I agree with you. As and more we interact with MSMEs, we begin to realize that they are feeling the squeeze much more than the larger ones. So inadvertently, are the QCOs moving in that direction? This is a very important message is arising from this report, and that is something which needs to be really examined and upfront. So I would like to conclude that while quality is not a trade barrier, but it must become a global competitive advantage. So the challenge before us is, how do we manage this powerful regulatory tool judiciously by applying QCOs with surgical precision, by supporting our supply chains, by ensuring compliance fosters competition. We can effectively minimize the circulation of substandard products, which of course is also one of our stated goals. The strategic recalibration outlined today in this report ensures that we fulfill our national commitment to excellence. We are not just building products, we are building trust. We are working together to develop world-class products of superior quality, thereby fulfilling the vision of an Atmanirbhar Bharat, and the world can trust us implicitly on this. So thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Singh. That was clearly a very, very thought-provoking talk, and I must say it was also very heartwarming to see that there is actually so much of concern for what industry is going through, so with that, I'm going to carry this conversation forward and ask Mr. Arun Goel. So you've been following this sector for a long time, since I started doing research, and I've in the past used your data, and I'm really glad to know that Prerna could as well. So what has been your experiences over the last many years, and both as someone who's following the various activities related to protection and related to trade?
Thank you very much. Montek is here, and I was part of the adventure in 1991 when the whole liberalization policy took place. And I was commissioned by the same Commerce Ministry to put harmonized codes on the complex import policy, which only experts like Takhtaram knew what was importable and what was not importable. So it's my job to follow the changes in the which are taking place, and I am doing it consistently now for the last 40 years. And there are very many things that keep happening, and to be part of the whole flow of events that take place, and then the interplay of things and how they start and how they are modified as you go along, and at the end how they are withdrawn. So that is something that I am working on, and we have a database which Prerna was one of the main motivating factors for that. And in that database, what Prerna has found is something which we have corroborated, in the sense that if you look at the non-tariffs, and you look at QCO BIS, then the total BIS are 765. Okay. Now, my view is that it is part of a continuum. Actually, there's a steady state of the economy, which is the license permit Raj. And that license permit Raj was broken in 1991, when I saw for the first time Manmohan Singh bring down the duties from 110% to 30, 40, It was all a very thing that was unusual. But it worked. It worked. And the DGTD was, to said goodbye to DGTD. Of course, it's back now with UPIIT under another name. But that was a big thing, and which has produced very good results in the economy, in the sense that exports went up, manufacturing went up, industries came up, But now my database shows that there are total, you have to look at it, my point is that you have to look at it from an interdisciplinary point of view, not just QCOs, but the other non-tariff barriers. So the other non-tariff barriers, one is the import policy, which is putting a QR under Foreign Trade Development and Regulations Act 1991, which Chidambaram himself wrote by hand himself. He liberalized the whole thing. First time a minister, worked on it himself, and he wrote the entire act by his own hand. So in that, you did away with QCIFs in 1995 with QRs after US took us to WTO, and they said that you can't have this in a WTO regime, and we finally in 2000 we withdrew all the QRs. But now the QRs are very much in place, in the sense they're very significant sectors, especially crude petroleum. It is closed, through a QR. Again, the other one which has really become again a WTO compatible medicine, which is anti-dumping, safeguards, and anti-subsidy. Now, in that, we have found that there are as many as 72 notifications. And these 72 notifications are covering a large, broad spectrum. For example, your steel. Steel is subject to safeguards. And all steel imports now, whether they are under anti-dumping or not, you have to go through a NOC. You have to go to Ministry of Steel and take a NOC, even if the item is otherwise importable. So like that, you have 72 this thing. The negative list of items, my database shows that there are 1560 negative list of items. Okay. And in BIS, that is QCO, there are 766 items. Now, what the database shows is that the major sectors which are affected are, of course, your chemicals is one major sector. They account for 23.14% of all non-tariff barriers. That means anti-dumping, safeguards, negative list, and QCO, they account for 23%. The other major hitter is, of course, your steel. Steel accounts again for 27.15% of all non-tariff barriers. Once again, in machinery, you have 10% of all non-tariff barriers are covering machinery. Things like injection molding machine, which is a basic thing of all manufacturing. Injection molding machine is also under anti-dumping. Then you have other things, which is other major items are there, but they are not listed in my database, where you have got on agriculture, you have got FSSAI, where FSSAI regulations clearance is required. And then there are many health standards which have to be met, environmental standards which are not really captured in the database. So what I would like to say is that what I found very significantly, especially in the case of chemicals, where the entire spectrum, that is from crude petroleum to petroleum products to ethylene to under chapter 29, you begin with ethylene, then polyethylene, then PET, and then on to, so the basic material as well as intermediates. These are all covered under one of the other QR, one or the other NTB. Now this is very serious in the sense that pharma also, there are many this thing. In fact, on solar, very interestingly, here you are emphasizing on solar, but now all solar parts components, they have to go through approval procedure. And unless they go through that procedure, you cannot import. So like that, each sector is more or less covered either under one of the NTB, and then the textiles, the duties are so high, which you have not really reduced. Even in 1991, they did not touch textiles, So basically what I would like to say is that now the government is going a little easy on it because of Trump tariff, and this NTB is a major factor that is coming in the negotiations. So many of the QCOs, their implementation dates are being pushed back. So 2026, 2025, like that. And then the whole procedure, many exemptions are being given, and time is being given to MSME, and exemptions are giving that this particular item we will not be covering, and many things are being suspended. So that is what is happening under the pressure of, as Sanjeet rightly pointed out, that there is so much pressure from the industry that, look, we are not getting our material. For example, I am a consultant to the mobile industry, and they require pure copper. Now, pure copper Hindalco does not make, and they only need 1 ton or 2 tons of pure copper. But they can't get the pure copper because there's a QCO on copper. So like that, I mean, I'm not against nationalism and all that, but you have to design the system so that you achieve your objectives. For example, in the US, I'm following Trump tariff very carefully. They had the clause of de minimis. So anything below $800, you could just import straight away. There are no duties on that. There are no tariff barriers on that. Now here in QCO, small quantity which are required for export production, these should automatically come under the de minimis clause. Now what does the exporter have to do? The exporter then, they say that exports are not covered in the QCO, but then exports of copper will not be covered. But copper as an input going into manufacture, that will be covered in the QCO. So then the poor exporter has to go to DGFT, and he has to then ask for advance authorization, where he has to give all sorts of justifications and bank guarantees and so on. And then under advance authorization, where the importer is ready to pay the duty, but in advance authorization, he will be free of duty also. So you are not putting input, you are not giving the imports a duty-free treatment. You only want that the quality should come in. Now you say under advance authorization, QCO will not operate. So for 1 ton of copper, he has to go to to UDFT?
Yeah, Mr. Goyal, I'm going to take this, but there's another round that we'll have in the Q&A as well.
Okay, okay.
So
Basically, I have said what I have to say, except that, there is a way out of QCO, and that way out is very tortuous. And it is being followed and the ball is rolling.
So, Mr. Rungta, I mean, taking off from what Mr. Goyal was talking about, the kind of experiences that industry and also traders, by the way, who face. I mean, it would be nice if you could share some of those and how should government really deal with many of these issues, apart from obviously the eliminating of QCs. As long as they exist, I mean, what is the best method of dealing with that?
Thank you so much for having me here. I represent the MSME sector. I myself am an MSME dealing into stainless steel pipe fabrication. I have a small unit where we are manufacturing stainless steel pipes, and also a trading entity wherein we are dealing into hardware fittings. We're importing from China and Vietnam. 70% of our business is almost import dependent, and we are bringing in high quality product. We have already set up a market for those products in last 15 years in Rajasthan. The problem with QCOs is, as already mentioned here, that it is not about quality. QCOs are being incessantly used as a protectionist measure to protect a few players, especially if I talk about my sector, stainless steel sector. There has to be an injury established before implementing any trade or non-trade barrier. Where is the injury? Which steel company in India is facing the injury? Say about stainless steel, there's one player which has got more than 80% market share. It has grown in the last 5 years with this implementation of QCOs. They were sitting at a PAT of 150 crores in 2019, and last year they clocked a profit of 2,500 crores. So if they've grown at a profit of more than 70% CAGR, where is the injury? You just cannot keep saying these words, cheap imports, substandard, while restricting imports for these MSMEs, the downstream industry. Whereas if you see that steel, the largest importers are these steel players only. They're importing slabs, which are the first primary stage of steel, the slabs. They're importing it directly. With the Chinese, they formed Chinese JVs with Chinese in Indonesia, and they're importing from there. So why this partiality? So it has to be categorically looked into. Every sector, steel is a large sector, stainless steel is there, it is also part of steel. There cannot be blanket rule for everything. One size cannot fit all. Say for traders, I've got also a trading entity. I deal in 30 products. BIS mandates 10,000 USD as a bank guarantee. So 10,000 USD per product, I have to keep it with BIS as bank deposit, as fixed deposit. How could an MSME operating, say, at a revenue of 10 CR a year block a amount of 5 CR for 30 products that I'm dealing into? 30 products comes to 3 lakh USD. So the problem is, if you've got to see the reality on the ground, what are MSMEs facing? Then the other problem is there. I deal in stainless steel. As per BIS norms, when say a product is there, I deal in stainless steel pipes. The pipes are made out of stainless steel sheets. Now the BIS standards are also on the pipes. They've got a separate standard on the sheets. They've got a separate standard on slabs. When I manufacture pipes, say I'm importing from a factory in Vietnam, they have been licensed by BIS after ensuring that the sheets being used by them to manufacture those pipes either are BIS certified, that means they're procuring it from a BIS certified factory, or they are BIS compliant. The idea of quality is compliance, not certification. We have made it a certification model that every factory of the world, whether I am procuring, whether it is supplying only 1 ton of steel to India throughout the year, has to go through this process that takes 7 to 8 months. a BIS inspector needs to visit that factory to certify that particular product. And we all know how, at the ground level, how much complacent things are, how things get certified. There are instances wherein I'm personally aware that for certifying a foreign factory, Indian samples from the Indian factory are being used to certify foreign factories. This is the level of complacency. So we have to look at it. Every sector needs to be deep dived into before implementing these kind of quality control orders. Say about fasteners, DGTR last year initiated a suo motu investigation on dumping from China of fasteners. They came out with a conclusion that fasteners are not being dumped from China. Then why QCO implementation? Why is the need of QCO? There are n number of fasteners, millions specifications of fasteners. Not every specification can be put down into the BIS rule book. So we have to see it. We have to get into the details of every sector. I'm talking about fasteners. In fasteners, DGTR came out with a conclusion that there's no dumping happening. There's an MIP already in place. The minimum import price is in place of 129 rupees per kg for fasteners. Now you see, fasteners are made out of mild steel as well. They're made out of stainless steel as well. The mild steel international cost is 60 rupees per kg. The stainless steel international base price is 120. And you've set up the same MIP for both kinds of steel. How could that be possible? I'm importing a 60 rupees base product. I'm mandated to bring it at 129, wherein the stainless steel product is also coming in at 129. So one size cannot fit all. This thing has to go. And as sir said, it has actually become the tool as same as the license Raj, wherein there's a lot of bureaucratic hurdles that have been put in to the system. The government is interfering into the business. We are very clear, as per our suggestion, as per our opinion, we believe that QCO should be restricted to end user products, the product that is finally being used by the end user, not on intermediate products. When the final product that reaches the consumer is quality compliant, that itself is sufficient. Why are you bringing in all the levels of product into the picture? Say for steel, what happened 3 months back, the steel ministry came out with a very bizarre notification. As I mentioned, that every level of steel, say a factory in Vietnam is certified for pipe, they're bringing in steel, it is checked that whether the steel that is being used is BIS compliant or certified. Now what they mandated 3 months back was that the steel being used is also to be BIS certified. That means I have to ask my Vietnamese supplier to ask his Malaysian supplier of sheets to get himself also registered with the Indian BIS standard, who has got technically nothing to do with Indian market. He is supplying sheets to Vietnam. Vietnam is doing the regional value content addition and then supplying to India. We are saying that QCOs do not impact exports because we can import anything to export without the QCO requirement. But if you see, if tomorrow my European buyer says that you need, today we are importing steel from China, say primary steel in form of to do the value addition here in India, and then to export to India, there's no QCO requirement. Tomorrow, if European says that you need to get your Chinese supplier also registered and as per our certified as per our requirement, what will happen? If the other countries follow the same suit, where will our exporters go? So you have to see with that, at that tangent, we have to see. We have to talk with the stakeholders at the ground level.
So thank you, Mr. Rungta. And just taking off from there, Anilji, there's this problem that the government would face. I mean, I was looking at some of these orders and so on. Almost every order has some, actually all of them have some industry, some element from industry proposing it. Many of them are small scale sector associations. So if I was sitting in the ministry or the relevant department, how should I deal with these kind of requests when these requests are coming from industry?
Sure. So before I respond to your question, it reminds me the book of Ha Jun Chang, Picking Away the Ladder. And it tells me that almost all the countries in the world in their journey to industrialization have used all the craft, that is all the instruments of the statecraft in order to protect the domestic industry and also spur industrialization indigenously. So to that count, actually using some of these instruments is not really problematic. It has been going on, and as your paper also shows that it has not been India exclusive trend, it has been worldwide trend. The problem actually is, the objection is on three counts. One is the approach and strategy. We have also mentioned approach, that instead of using it as for ensuring quality, it is being used as a protectionist measure. Then problem is the strategy level also. In China, so I've been going there for quite some time. So we have seen that when the televisions were production of television was there of black and white in China. It was all spread. We in India also had almost all state governments setting up their own black and white television manufacturing plants, Haryana and UP, Yaptrons and
Yes.
Similar was the case there also. So they developed the market. So what they chose as a strategy was that for the entry level, they removed all the barriers and allowed foreign firms to come and establish the factories. Once this was done, then they followed a strategy that because now they wanted the color television technology. So they put very high tariff on color television and force the foreign buyers to come and set up the plant there, otherwise they would not be able to supply the product there. Similar, once this was done, they approached for the LED television, then for the plasma, then for the curved. So this is a strategy. So they have used this as a strategy, and our approach has been totally different that way. We faltered on that count. The second problem or objection is on the count of the processes. The processes we used, like the one you are mentioning that okay, go to Vietnam, and the process that you have to follow with the different ministries to get things done. We do not have laid down guidelines. That's why anybody who may be just a single manufacturer of the item can approach the ministry and justify his or her case and try to get QCO in order to secure the market share. So there will be people always, whether it's small or large. As a matter of fact, most of them have been large companies. The small you can give maybe twice, maybe a couple of other products in chemical.
So there is an investigation going on for mobile covers right now.
Yes.
And it was the submitting entity was the Mobile Covers Makers Association.
Yes. So I mean,
So
you have to have guidelines for that.
So it's not some large industry, it's a small.
Oh, correct. I mean, a couple of them would be small industry, whether small or large. The problem is that you have to have the guidelines that what ultimately is going to lead to. And third is with regards to institutional capacity. So recently there has been a paper that has been brought out on decoding QCOs. Do we need a rethink? It's by RAS, and by the way, ex-Commerce Secretary Rajiv Kher and Anil Johari, who was heading the quality QCO quality body in India, he was CEO. They themselves have found out this, and let me read out quickly that shows that what is the problem. A growing concern in India's regulatory landscape is the expansion of QCOs beyond final consumer goods to include raw material, intermediate inputs, and components. So while the principle that all products placed in the market should be safe is valid, in practice, the blanket regulation of upstream components has led to disruption in domestic manufacturing and export-linked supply chains. This is the problem. Similarly, another thing that they mention is that reveals a deeper lack of coordinated action across ministries where regulatory mandates are being executed in isolation. Rather than as part of a synchronized industrial and governance strategy, for QCOs to be truly effective, India's approach must combine regulatory intent with institutional preparedness and stakeholder participation. No such thing happened. And that's why ultimately it is leading to quite chaotic outcomes and disruptions in supply chain. That's what we feel.
So I'll just one more. You still haven't answered that one part of it. How does the government deal with this? Because the stakeholders are industry and they are asking for the implementation of some QCOs. It's not just large industries, the point I'm making. There are many small industry
See,
associations.
first of all, for protection, there are WTO compliant instruments in your hand. You could use safeguards. You could, if there is dumping taking place, you can, government Ministry of MSME, as a matter of fact, as a fund to fund associations for filing anti-dumping cases. So all those instruments are available. Why can't we use them? But this is the simplest way. And also, and because it is done very quickly, so the problem is that we have a lot of unintended consequences on the supply chain.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that, we are actually right on time. And is there any other remarks that you would like to make? I'm going to open it for the Q&A.
I think listen.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Prerna, would you like to say anything on this?
No. So on what Mr. Goel has said, that it should be.
Yeah, it
It
is.
should be looked at in an overall sense and a comprehensive sense. So we would really like to complement, the database that we have made of the QCOs with other forms of protection to see what's the comprehensive picture that is coming out, at sectoral level. Because as per my understanding, it's not only the QCOs, but other, when we talk to other stakeholders, many other barriers that restrict the imports of key goods to the country.
Thank you. Any comments that you would like to make?
No comments, in fact, a request, So in fact, what you just mentioned, and thank you for asking that question, because we find, and I've been in the government now for long enough, 35 years now, whether we are negotiating an FTA, whether we are QCO is only one part, and QCO happens very quickly, anti-dumping, any such procedure, the engagement by the stakeholders is normally very minimal, except for the ones who are actually advocating a particular case. They'll be very, very aggressive about it. But every other part of the stakeholder group is very quiet. And then when something happens and somebody says, I'm not blaming the stakeholders. I'm also saying that the reverse engagement part of the government with the stakeholders, that channel also is not very robust. So I'm very happy that from this stage, from this discussion, this is coming up, that stakeholder engagement, and I've seen it in other regions, other geographies, wherever there is a very robust engagement with the government before any action is taken, that leads to a very robust regulation, which is very accurate, which is precision oriented, and really has the effect it is intended to. So we can dissect too much, but I think Bhandari's question remains unanswered. How do you deal with competing demands from the industry? After all, there are people just like you and me sitting in the government who will be having to address it. So let's look at those certain responses from the group today.
Thank you. Thank you. Muntek.
Thanks. Am I
Yeah, you're audible.
amplified? Thank you. Thanks, Laveesh. Well, first of all, let me compliment Prerna and her team. I know there's always a team, and you did mention them. This is not only very timely, but it's actually a very good paper. I have some technical little quibbles. I'll discuss them with you separately. I think the most important thing is that, and Sanjeet Singh also sort of said this is timely, is very important. I think your point, and indeed Sanjeev's point, that there is no public perception that industry is unhappy with any aspect of anything that's being done right now. Now, I mean, I don't expect no industry wants to sort of be in the newspapers saying they've criticized government policy, but there must be ways in which they communicate it privately. Usually, I'm really struck by how many the two industry representatives, and of course, Goelji's, I don't know if you call yourself an industry representative or just someone knowledgeable. The issues that have been raised are very, very crucial. And there's no doubt in my mind that unless at some higher level within the government, this is not recognized, you are back with a DGTD license permit Raj. As a matter of fact, the DGFT is not staffed to do these kinds of things. The DGTD thought it was staffed, although everybody in industry told me that the only guys who go into DGTD are the ones who can't get a job in industry. But sure enough, somebody will point out that what does the DGFT know? So let's have another DGTD. It'll be an unmitigated disaster. So I really hope that you gentlemen convey in a gentle sort of way, both to NITI Aayog and to the government. And this is still early stage. I mean, it can be taken care of. Because let's face it, what is the big thing that the government is talking about? Ease of doing business. Okay. This shows the ease of doing business problem in reality. And let's be clear, license permit Raj hurt the small scale and medium scale much more than it hurt the big scale, simply because the fixed cost of dealing with it are easily borne by a huge enterprise, impossible for a small enterprise. So I just want to say that both a timely paper and a timely discussion, and actually a surprisingly frank response from industry, which I've never heard so far in any public meeting. So congratulations to you for getting it organized.
Yeah, so yourself, please. And then I'll take, we'll go one at a time.
Hi, everyone. I'm Niharika. I work with the Asia Group, which is a firm that consults with a lot of American firms that are looking to enter India. So again, on the firm side, I second the points that you make. Want to make a couple of theoretical points for starters. You started by talking about the actual theory of the state. Here we have goods being dealt with in the market. What is the market failure here? The market failure is information asymmetry. The consumer does not know how good the product is, and the person producing the product knows. And so the state comes in and gives a standard. Now, going on the second step, we don't have a problem with the state setting the standard. We have a problem with the state making it mandatory, inspecting it, and giving certification. I tried to look at the same regime in the UK, in the US, and then I went to GCC countries, which are more, say, relatable to India's experience. And almost every country has a self-declaration regime where every trader is given a presumption of conformity. And it's only after that the good travels. And there are certain cases where there are excesses, there are certain high-risk goods that are inspected for certain compliances. Now, we are starting from a point where all our goods by blanket go through this process. The second point I want to make is more of a regulatory point, that when we look at the BIS Act, the points on the basis of which a QCO can be issued are technically WTO compliant, but quite expansive in terms of nature. So we have national security, public health, we have broad categories of exceptions on the basis of which, a QCO can be issued. Now, this stems also into the kind of regulator or the kind of authority, BIS is. BIS is not just a certifying authority, it is also an enforcing authority. So why is one authority doing both functions, which causes a conflict of interest? So there are a lot of such points that I would like to make, but the basis of all of this is that Ha-Joon Chang's economic theory applies to a lot of developed countries, but not in India. Here we need to solve the basics. And the basics include removing the state out of this process of exchange of goods. And
I'll just ask you to, so your points, it would be good if you can put them together, and I'll ask one of our team members to be in touch with you for that.
Sure.
Then we'll be sharing that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Laveesh. First of all, my congratulations. Whenever I've come to your earlier sessions are more macroeconomics. So first time, this is highly micro and very pertinent for industry. So I would like to, Sanjeet ji, you are representing government in this panel. I would like to share with you way back in 90s, and we talked about 91. I had promoted an electronics manufacturing company. We were doing computer monitors and television assemblies. And we had our own R&D. We used to design our own circuits. And I gave standing instructions to my R&D head. Do not use an Appendix 3 item. Because this was a high obsolescence industry. By the time we would design a product, the life cycle was so short. I said, we much rather pay more money. Don't, even if it is a better design, if I have to, those days there was OGL and Appendix. It took months. So we said, don't do it. Let's take a policy decision not to do it. So it was really a big relief when Commerce Ministry at that time, we always used to have an argument. I cannot predict what should be an OGL item because technology changes so fast. So please have a negative list and leave everything open for imports. And the government took that decision. So I totally agree with Shaunak and Anil and various other panel members that why do we need to have any kind of QCO restriction on intermediate products or raw materials? Because after all, you're trying to protect the interest of the user, for which enough mechanisms are there. If I sell something to defense or communication, they put me through such stringent standards that BIS can never even dream of it. If I'm selling it to a consumer in the open market, then BIS comes in. Let them put a standard on the finished product.
So,
but intermediate and raw material should go.
thank you, sir. Dr. Chadha.
Thank you. A word of appreciation once again, Prerna. I have been following up on this paper with you. So I think two queries that must be discussed. One is the nominal protection versus effective protection. With the inverted duty structure in many of the cases, wouldn't this raise the bar for effective protection and the difference between the nominal protection and effective protection? And hence we may suffer on our exports. So I'll be very brief. We can discuss that. The second point that I have not heard is that many of the countries are going to WTO complaining against India's QCOs. So won't it involve another cost on the government and the country to get those issues resolved? Thank you.
So would you want to answer that? Because this is the first question we've had, right?
Yes, Dr. Chadha. So definitely this will raise the effective protection. And that is a reason that we are also planning to complement this, the database of QCOs with other forms of protection to see sector-wise, how protected are different sectors' products, especially the ones that are at the intermediate stage are, so that, it gives us an assessment of the effective rate of protection. So for everyone's understanding, effective rate of protection is that, the difference between how the intermediate or the inputs are protected vis-a-vis the final products are. An inverted duty structure is when the inputs are highly protected and as compared to the final products. So which is detrimental for the production competitiveness in the Indian manufacturing ecosystem. So definitely, yes. And second one on the WTO, yes, we have been following up that many countries have raised, like for example, Vietnam has raised against the viscose staple fiber QCO that was implemented to the WTO. But again, many countries are also implementing such policies which are not WTO compliant. And so this raises the question on WTO sanctity. Broadly, I would say that issues are being raised, but then what's happening to those issues that are being raised and it's going to the dispute stage that is to do with WTOs.
Thank you.
May I add to what Prerna has said?
Sure.
That now that India is in the big soup, vis-a-vis Trump tariff, and negotiations are going on for some kind of deal with US, NTB is a very important part of the whole negotiation. So what the point here made, it's already under discussion, and many of the NTBs are being suspended in anticipation of the discussion that will take place. So there is a lot of pressure. There is a lot of pressure.
So I have two questions. Oh, I have four questions right now. So yourselves first, the lady here. Yeah. Could you also introduce yourself?
Yes. So, hello, I'm Tanya, and I work at the Cohen Group. We provide geopolitical advice to US corporates. So my question is to...
Sorry, could you repeat? Where do you...
I work at the Cohen Group. We provide geopolitical advice to corporates. So my question is for Sanjeet, sir. Sir, you had very well outlined the government intentions towards the feedback that's coming from the industry with respect to QCOs. And we also see there was this recent news piece which said that NITI Aayog has formed a committee chaired by Mr. Rajiv Gauba to look at QCO reforms. And we also see industry representation on that committee. So I just wanted to ask, how far do you see the government moving in that direction of bringing in those next generation reforms that have been pledged? And how far do you see this problem of QCOs, if I can put it that way, being resolved from the government's end? Also because the committee has been formed.
The question is to you.
So I will not be spilling any beans, but the idea is, yes, there are discussions. In fact, exactly what we were discussing today, that there has to be more interaction to understand the pain points and how they can be addressed from the industry. That is exactly what has happened. This high-level committee actually is going into the finer details and the deep down grains and examining that. The report will be out very soon, so there's no point of me saying anything about that right now. It should be at the end of the month, maybe. That really depends on the chairperson. But yes, the process which has been discussed today is exactly what has been adopted. That the industry is being heard, pain points are being addressed, questions are being asked with a very open mind. So I think that itself is a very strong sense of reassurance. And Laveesh is an integral part of that process, I think, so he can really come in and without telling us our outcome. But the outcome is nothing hidden, it's going to be a very positive, transformative one. There's no doubt about it, Laveesh.
No, thank you. But I think I'd like to just take a minute on that. I think what has been missed out in the race towards developing policy towards Viksit Bharat and rapid growing is the underlying framework which somehow different departments were not able to, there needs to be a coherence in that. So different departments, many times it happens when you're moving very rapidly, they have their own methods of doing things, their own methods of understanding a problem or also of figuring solutions. And when that coherence gets lost, you have policy incoherence as well. And that's essentially what needs to be solved. So I can just answer that beyond that, of course. I'm good. I have four hands. I'm going to take all of those questions in one go. And please also identify yourself and also the panelists you would like to answer.
Hi, I'm Sarthak. I'm from Economic Loss Practice. We assist a lot of clients on BIS and other international trade measures such as anti-dumping duties. My question is for Ms. Prerna. First of all, great report. Fantastic work by you and your team. When you accounted for the impact of QCOs on imports and exports, did you look at the date of entry into force, or is it the date of notification of the QCO? So that is A. And B, for products which have been extended for a long time, for 2 to 3 years, like extreme chemical products, do you see any do you have any observations on how that extension period affects imports and exports? So those are my two questions.
Thank you. So there were three hands up. Yeah, ma'am. So please make it brief and also please.
It was a pleasure to meet all the esteemed panelists. I'm Astha Gyani from Siemens Healthcare, representing FICCI Medical Devices Committee. So what we have realized is MedTech, we have been making noise on QCOs and the implementation issues, but somehow the challenges have not being addressed appropriately, and our sector is fully regulated. I would say it is 100% regulated. It comes under it is governed by medical devices rules, and also there is slight contradiction to our sector is that while BIS sector section 41, it specifies that the Drug and Cosmetic Act should be exempted. Still, we see that for our intermediaries and for the spare parts and accessories, what we bring in for servicing this installed base.
You stick to the question, make it brief, please.
For my question is for Mr. Sanjeet ji, for the high-level committee which has been formed, if we can have stakeholder consultation with MedTech and if FICCI could have an audience with your team. That would be really appreciated.
Thank you. We'll just take that on board.
Hi, I'm Udit Bhuvna, journalist from the print. So my question is with regards to the impact of QCO has been on the MSMEs per se maximum. So as a burden of cost for them, so have you determined any how much of the cost of the top line or the bottom line as is the QCO impacting for the MSMEs as a percentage?
Thank you. The person at the back, yeah.
So I'm Ritwik Saspal. I'm representing IB industry and the senior economist there. So we deal with home appliances. So I think it's a big industry. And in home appliance, we also face huge problem in QCOs. And only request I have, as we mentioned by Mr. Sanjeet, that if there is a stakeholder communication, please invite us so that we can tell our problems. Because we are dealing with AC, and AC, the market is huge and there is huge possibility. And we are facing on copper tubes problems import from China, and that's a huge problem. So the communication has to be fixed.
Thank you. I'll just get the lady there.
Hi everyone, I'm Navya from Dalberg Advisors. We're working on the Bharat Climate Forum currently, and my question is in a different direction. I know the discussion has broadly been on separating the trade regulation from the quality aspect of QCOs, but I was wondering if there's any scope for QCOs to also support domestic manufacturing, especially on the upstream end and on the intermediate goods end. This is for the entire panel.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to, okay, one last time, just please also identify whom you want to ask.
My name is Mike, I'm from FISME, and my question is to the panel that from the BIS perspective, one of their point is that they do not have any administrative mechanism to check whether the intermediary product that is being imported is for the export purpose or for domestic consumption. So would you suggest any change in the act or the rules for that?
Okay, so I'm going to request the panelists to answer, going from the last one, Anilji, if you could do that.
Okay. No, I'm not answering the direct question that he has asked, but I would like to point out one fact that, how QCOs can be used for building up really the capacity in the domestic market. And one good example is of pharmaceuticals. So WHO GMP came and there was hue and cry because there were a lot of manufacturers in the MSME sector that were not compliant, and they did not have the capacity to do that. So this whole process of consultation went on for approximately 2 years. And then a lot of other institutions came in and joined hands. For example, SIDBI came with a financial model that, okay, 2 to 5 crore rupees without any collateral security, we'll extend the loan at a very reasonable rate. Similarly, other institutions came in, okay, we'll provide the training to the state departments who are going to inspect because they did not have, you can say, much knowledge, or maybe they were not really, number was not good enough. So as a matter of fact, all these institutions, all stakeholders came together to achieve a particular goal in a specific segment. Then it works. So what happened? So not only the capacity was built in India, India's exports doubled in pharmaceuticals and continuously growing. So similar things can happen, but then it cannot be just one QCO from the obscure ministry and then everybody forgets about it, and then it is up to the customs department and the BIS that's out. Then it won't work. Then it is a kind of a disruption.
Thank you. Shaunak?
I think I'd like to answer the question of which Mayankji raised. So he raised about there's no way we can track intermediate goods and raw material, whether originating from the BIS certified factory or not, right? Am I right? So this was the issue raised by us as well, wherein a particular factory, say, is certified by BIS. It is supplying to another trader. Maybe I'm not directly dealing with the factory. I'm the buyer. The exporting company. I'm not dealing directly with the exporting company, but I'm buying from some trader or some associate of that particular company. Now, there's no way that BIS could track or customs could track whether that product originated from the BIS factory or not. So that trader is selling the product to me. Simply the CML number which the BIS allots to that particular company is uploaded and the goods are cleared. So there's no way we can track whether that particular product originated from that actual factory or not, because you cannot mandate that the company manufacturing it only has to sell to the importer here. It can be sold by anyone. So for that, in steel we got it done. every steel consignment that enters into India needs to be registered on the SIMS portal. So we wrote to the ministry, and what they did was they created a additional requirement there on the website, on the SIMS portal, that whenever you're applying for a SIMS for a particular consignment, there has to be a unique number that has to be generated by the manufacturer, and it has to be mapped to that particular consignment so that the origin is established.
Wow. And that makes it impossible for the very small
Yes.
players, of course.
Now, I'd like to just put a point of law that on imports, the BIS apply only when that particular standard is compulsory for domestic industry. Okay, because this is WTO requirement, national treatment. So so there's a whole list of 1,300 items, which is there on their website. They don't update it, that they leave it to me, but there's a list that is there. And that same BIS standard has to be compulsorily followed for domestic industry also. So for example, footwear. Now footwear, they put under BIS compulsory for domestic industry. So I don't think very many footwear is being imported. But domestic industry is having a very tough time because of this BIS. And it is all being done in the name of the consumer. Nowhere is the consumer being consulted. Nowhere is there impact on the consumer that is being studied. In the name of the consumer. Even Consumer Affairs Ministry is not in the picture, although technically BIS is in the Consumer Affairs Ministry. But the consumer is not being consulted. So this aspect also, Prerna, you should keep in mind that you are talking about the consumer, the arm army on the street. So how is he affected?
Thank you. So that leaves two questions for you, Prerna. I think you made a note of those.
So on the year of notification vis-a-vis the entry of force, we took the year of notification, but the lags that we took accounted for the years that must have passed since the year of notification. But having said that, that was a challenge or a gap, I would say, of the work, any work that is being taken, on QCOs, because it's a recent phenomena. And the surge started happening in 2019-20, and we are just 5 years after, we are placed 5 years after that. But that was an assumption that we'll take the year of the notification, and the lags would account for any extension that might have been given to the sector.
That's it. There was a second question as well that you had.
Yeah, extension.
Okay, on the extension. Any closing points?
No, I'll just have a really quick 2 points to make. One, thank you very much for the interest you have shown that you want to participate in stakeholders. So you were not waiting for me to say that.
Yes.
Otherwise, you won't have participated.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And the second part is, yes, you can write to NITI Aayog member, Mr. R.K. Gauba is leading it. You can write to him. You can write to me. So we make sure that whatever you send to us will be definitely taken into consideration before the final votes. Is that all right?
Thank you. Thank you. I must say this has been a very different seminar here at CSEP, and we have had so many people from industry. Thank you very much for showing up in such good numbers, and I hope this particular interaction continues at CSEP. I must say, as researchers, we sometimes do feel that there is a bit too much of a distance between ourselves and people and stakeholders, as was mentioned, including those in industry. So thank you again very much, Anilji, for putting us all in touch with each other. And thank you for being here and always helping us do this work. Shaunak for always coming up with complete candidness, all your own pains and troubles. Arunji, it's great, and I hope you continue doing your work because it helps us in taking ours forward. And Sanjeet, that was really truly a very, very great of you to have to come out at such short notice. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing that, and of course sharing with us your own challenges that you face in going about this. And once again, thank you all.
Thank you.